There are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. When we're afraid, we pull back from life. When we're in love, we open up to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance.
Coming to you from our studio in Santa Barbara, California, this is the Fear Me Out podcast. We're not your typical self-help program. Our show takes a deep dive into those psychological issues that affect us on a daily basis. We hope to shift your perspective and have you experiencing emotions differently. Now here are your hosts, Kim Foskey and Dr. Dana Saperstein.
Hippocrates once said, "I'll remember that there is art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy, and understanding may outweigh the surgeon's knife." On this episode, we welcome to our podcast studio Dr. David Langer, who is the chair of neurosurgery at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City and the star of the Netflix docuseries Lenox Hill. So please join us as we speak with Dr. Langer on how he navigates through a myriad of emotions, not only for his patients, but for himself personally, as he performs one of the most difficult and complex professions that only a few choose to do. Well, we're gonna start and gonna ask a question that I think the former may be easier for you to answer than the latter. But can you tell our listening audience who David Langer, MD, is, and then tell our audience who David Langer is?
Wow. Well, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, they're sort of the same person. There's maybe different personas, I would imagine. I think David Langer, MD, is someone who grew up in a middle-class family. My dad was a doctor. My grandfather was a doctor. Never really thought about doing anything else, and sort of fell into neurosurgery because my dad's illness was what attracted me to neuroscience and neurosurgery. But I'm very ambitious, and I wanted to save the world and wanted to take care of sick people. And over the years living in New York City, realized that just doing good often isn't enough, that there are challenges, even if you're doing all the right things, that righteous anger is not a good place to be. And professionally, I had a lot of challenges and failures and obstacles, both of my own doing and outside of my control, and that have been very difficult, but also by the same token, very gratifying. I think the output of this led to the Netflix show, just for purely random luck reasons. You sort of create your own luck. It was a series of relationships that led to that. But it just, I think, was in my mind, that really was a manifestation of the effort that I've made to remain a human being as a neurosurgeon and express myself in a way that has changed over the years. And so the David Langer MD piece was manifest in that as both the technical effort I've made to be the best neurosurgeon I can be. By the same token, I think it also reflected the evolution I've gone in as a person, as a physician. And going back to David Langer, I think that it's similar. I mean, I think that it reflected me as a person, as much as a doctor. The effort, I try to be a great dad, I try to be a good spouse, and be as balanced as possible in my life, whatever that means. But I think that the similarity between the two sides is that I think we face conflict, challenges, failures, both that, like I said, that some of you can control, some of you can't. And the lesson that both sides of me has learned is that these experiences, just if you do it the right way, are actually really valuable, and that it can make you better. You actually can't, I think, maximize what you can contribute to the world and to your family and to yourself without having some really rough moments. And it's how you react to them and how you overcome them, and I think really defines you, whether as a professional or as a human being. And so I think that's the best way to answer that question.
David, one of the premises that Kim and I operate from is that fear is a normal part of life, and that it's actually healthy under certain circumstances. And it's how you react to fear that actually determines the outcome. I'm assuming that that's something that you're very well aware of, and that is a big part of your professional life, is how you manage your fear and the fear that your patients bring to the table.
It's funny. I I can't. I actually met Alex Honnold at a conference about 2 months ago, and one of the differences between us and the fear we feel and say a free climber has is he can die. Like he physically, if he makes a mistake, he's going to die. Like I'm never going to die from making a mistake. And so, so fear is, kind of, it's different kind of fear. It's ego fear. And as a surgeon, what are people going to think of me? What's the patient going to think of me? Am I going to get sued? But so I asked him, like, how do you overcome that? It was very simple. He said, look, I know I'm good. I've trained really hard. I know he's super confident he sees a climb, and it doesn't dawn on him that, he just can do it. It's like he just shows up and he prepares for it. And so it really limits his fear. He said one time the most scared he ever got was he got to within 10 feet of the top while he was training for the Yosemite climb. He said he got with it, and all of a sudden he got lost. And it was the first time that he really thought he was going to die. Like he didn't see a way out. And it really taught him the importance of preparation. And so, my take on that is I can't say I've really felt fear in that way. I felt anxiety about being prepared. And I've been in situations in the operating room that were fearful, that required me where I was afraid of losing a patient, but not myself, and so that's a different kind of fear. It's more like, oh my God, what have I done? And then how do I get out of this? And I think that all along I've really trained as hard as I can throughout my life just to be the best I can be. And as I've gotten older, I go into cases knowing that I'm very confident that I'm doing things for the right reason, that I'm not really afraid because I know that I've trained and that I do the best I can. Certain things are not in my control. There are very few people I think that are better at what they do than me in the cases that I do. It doesn't mean there aren't other nurses that aren't better at something. It's just the case that I do. I really believe that I'm as confident in what I do as possible. And that really mitigates the fear, just like Alex Honnold mitigated his fear by just really training hard and making sure that you feel like you're capable of doing things that you're asked to do. I think when you get outside your bandwidth and you start doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing, or that you're doing for money or ego, or you want people to think you're great rather than being great, that can create a lot of challenges for a normal person. In our business, we have a lot of narcissists, so they aren't even aware of that, and I don't think I'm narcissistic, and I think that I compare myself now to when I first started, where I didn't have the skills I have now. And I probably, having gone through some very anxious moments and getting out of trouble, just realizing what I can do. And I know that I'll be in those situations, and I have more peace and calm now when those things happen, because I feel like I just have to, pay attention to detail and rely on my experience and my skills, and don't put myself in harm's way, and make the decisions along the way that are, stepwise, to avoid doing things that might put me in harm's way as a surgeon. In fact, I trained in all these catheter techniques, interventional. I after 10 years in practice, I went back and did another fellowship because I started to see the field changing, and I learned how to do all the catheter-based treatment of vascular diseases. And I found that I wasn't as good. I was older when I trained. I had partners that were better than me at it. And while I liked doing these things, I didn't get the same joy out of doing them that I did as a surgeon. I was a little less patient with it. I wasn't as natural for me. I just stopped. I didn't want to put myself, because that's when you have fear. Like when you're not really prepared and you're not skilled enough, that's when I started to feel fear. Like I just really don't want to do those cases. I don't want to put myself in harm's way. I just stopped doing that type of work. And so I eliminated that from my ballywick, and that's okay. You can't do everything, and let someone else do it who's better than I am. And I think that's really the secret sauce when it comes to our business, is knowing what your bandwidth is, knowing what your limitations are. Whatever your bandwidth is, make sure you're damn good at what you do. Your decision making should be based on money or ego or control or trying to prove you're better than someone. Ask for help, get assistance, ask for advice, and that really, I think, has solved a lot of this kind of fear that you might have, and it's been a great solution for me.
So, David, you recognize that part of what you're talking about is that you developed an enormous amount of faith in yourself as a practitioner, and that you do everything that you can to sort of be as resourceful and resilient as possible?
Yeah, I think part of that manifests in trying to be innovative. And if things aren't perfect, I'll try to make them better. I'll try new devices, new technologies, but then actually brings fear back, not fear, but anxiety again, because now you're trying something new and it doesn't work all the time. And so you sort of have to again, sort of stop yourself and take some deep breaths and, okay, I'm going to get through this. This isn't working right now, but there's a way around this. So it's kind of a never-ending cycle, because you never really want to plateau. You always want to kind of push yourself to make it interesting. There's this I think he's Czech, a Czech psychologist who wrote about the flow state. And the way to stay in flow is that your skills match the degree of difficulty. So when you're first getting started as a medical student, I learned how to put an IV in, for example. And, back then you never put an IV in. So you're really stressed. How do I put the tourniquet on? You don't want the patient to feel pain. You miss the first time. You're like, oh, did that hurt? And then, but gradually it gets easy. So you relax a little bit and it's a lot easier. And it's no problem. It's the same skill, but now the difficulty of the problem matches your skill set. And after a while it gets boring. I don't want to do IVs anymore. What the hell? Let somebody else do it. And that really runs throughout the rest of your career, to go from, a lay student and then a medical student to a neurosurgeon doing aneurysm surgery. It's an incremental process, but all along the way, it's your skills matching your anxiety. And the trouble is, if you don't, at least in my opinion, if you don't kind of push yourself along that way, you can get bored, because, if everything's easy, life isn't as interesting, the cases aren't as interesting. And so managing that and knowing when to stop, because it's not all about you being interesting. You want to do the right thing for patients. And that requires this constant pressure against the skill set and pressure against the difficulty, and then finding ways to do it easier or technologies to make it easier. But each one of those little incremental steps kind of pushes you out of your flow curve every now and then. And that's the challenge, knowing what that point is and staying there. And the way you overcome that, my partner, John Bookvar, it's mindfulness and grit, because you have to take a deep breath sometimes and then rely back on your experience. So if there's fear, it's getting too far out of your flow curve into that anxiety area where that skill doesn't quite match the difficulty. And then the way you manage that is it's mindfulness. I think it's grit. And falling back on your experience of overcoming those obstacles before. And I think that really works. And I think that's really the secret to, I feel, my success for myself. I don't look for external validation when it comes to this. I have a lot of validation internally in myself. I know I'm doing the best I can all the time.
And how much does your intuition play a role in some of these situations where you're not exactly sure in the moment what the technological answer might be, because you've never been in that position before with this particular person and their particular problem?
Well, this morning, as an example, I'm using this new way of imaging intraoperatively for a straightforward lumbar disc. And lumbar disc surgery is a hour and a half operation. Usually isn't very difficult, but it can be. And I just was using some new technology today that isn't normally used for lumbar discs, and everything was fine. And then the navigation thing failed because one switch got turned off, and all of a sudden I was there for 3.5 hours doing an hour and a half operation. It's frustrating. Then you got to do it the old-fashioned, bring in the X-ray, and I got a room full of people. What the hell's going on with this guy? I got an anesthesiologist, the nurses. Why is it taking so long? I think part of it's just preparing yourself for those struggles and realize you can always fall back on your old skills or your old way of doing business, but you can't. And I'd be lying to you if I say I care about what people think of me. I want people to think I'm skilled and think I'm a good surgeon or because I like taking care of people. And if your OR staff, it sees you struggle or thinks you're not any good, that's going to affect people's confidence in sending you patients. And so, the way you overcome that is just, you'd say, okay, this is new. It's, I'm doing the best I can. It's not working right now. Let's just, go back to the usual and customary, and it worked out, and, you have to try not to think too much about what people's opinions are of you when you do this. And that's really challenging. That takes work. But that's, I think, part of being internally driven to do the right thing, even if people don't even realize it. You just have to just be focused on validating for yourself. I think that may be the best way to answer that.
Did seeing yourself on TV change you in any way?
Yeah. I mean, I think I wasn't really prepared for it. One thing I'm very proud of is, John and I were very close before the show started. I was really the one that got the whole thing going. I spent the whole year of 2017 kind of greasing the skids for this because there was a remarkable amount of resistance in our health system from legal, marketing, HIPAA police, unions, you name it, And I was very motivated for a variety of reasons. One, we're in a very competitive market in New York City. We're like the upstart department. I knew that the attention would be a good thing, but I also was incredibly confident about who we were legit. Like, I knew the things we were doing. Of course we can let people in because there's nothing we're afraid of. It's not like we want to hide anything from anyone. And so I was very confident it would come out well because I trusted the filmmakers. But I still wasn't really prepared for not just seeing myself, but the exposure. And honestly, John and I are closer now than we've ever been. And there are many stories of when people get that much attention, it was like a spike. It's really fallen off now for the most part. But, all of a sudden we're getting called by different magazines or different media to do interviews. And John would get called and I wouldn't, or I would get called and he wouldn't. And then the biggest manifestation of this is that I was interviewed by like Entertainment Tonight or something. And the interviewee at the end was like, we really think your buddy John is like Dr. McDreamy on Grey's Anatomy. And I was like, oh, really? And who do they think I am? They're like, oh, you're the administrative guy, Richard, whatever his name is. I'm like, it like blew me away. I was like, oh my God, people think I'm like, an administrator? Is this? I was devastated.
I'm sure.
I actually, it was the best that could have happened to me because I talked to Adi, who's the part of the couple, Adi Barish, who did all the filming. And he's like, look, Dave, you're going to be exposed. They're going to be public. You're in the public now. There are going to be people who think you're great, people who think you suck. They're going to see you through your own eyes. And I really just let it go. And then I kind of reveled in John's persona. And I really loved seeing him get attention. And all that shit went away, like completely. And it was so great because we both have really enjoyed this process together and we don't have any jealousy or, there really is zero. There are some times where I'm like, roll my eyes with John, but it's in like a good way. Like I tease him and he teases me and it's been a really wonderful experience. And you can see why like rock bands break up or athletes get all pissed off at why teams fall apart because people can't stand sometimes when somebody else gets attention and they don't. And so that was the first lesson I had. The other one was I was watching the show with my kids and my daughter started to cry. She was like 16 at the time. I was like, Molly, what's wrong? She goes, Daddy, I thought you were going to be different. You were mean. And I was like, my daughter was seeing me through the eyes different. She'd never seen me at work. And I think that she was like loved Grey's Anatomy and like she wanted to see me as like the doctor in Grey's Anatomy somehow, that would be, it was like the fictional side. And what she saw was, the most part, that's who I am. I think that I have, I can be serious, I can be funny, I have a sense of humor, but I also, it's a difficult job. And, I started to sense that, the way people see you is different than maybe you see yourself. And also but I also was very humbled and really the most, remarkable observation I had is the ability to let people into your life was really humbling and also really gratifying at the same time. And so in the end, it was the first time you see yourself kind of odd, but ultimately, if you compare, I think myself from the very first episode, where I think I was a little uncomfortable with the cameras, to very quickly, I just like accepted that it wasn't like I didn't pretend they weren't there. I knew they were there. I just didn't care. And so I evolved that way with the way I looked at myself too. It's like at the beginning, it was like kind of weird, but then I just didn't care anymore. It's like, I'm just myself. I'm not trying to entertain anybody. I'm just being me. And when I saw myself, I was like, yeah, that's me. That's great. Like it really came out. And so it really wasn't that bad at the end. It was more or less the way I reacted, the way other people reacted. That was the harder part than actually my own reaction to myself in a way.
Most of your care, at least in the show, were patients that you had for quite a while, 6 months, a year, few years. I'm sure you provide a lot of episodic care as well. Again, the context of the conversation today about taking on other people's emotions, that has to be a fine line for you, going through that myriad of getting to know a patient really well, to becoming friends with them, becoming friends with their family. And I think the show portrayed that very well, especially with that police officer from Tennessee, where you got very close to. And then I think there was a young teenage girl that wanted to be a physician, and you got involved in her life as well there. I mean, it did an excellent job of showing you as a human, taking the doctor, the neurosurgeon, the God complex, whatever you want to say, away from it and saying, okay, I can be this real person with these real emotions and really feel what you're going through there. So for me, for the job that you do, I mean, and again, you do from head through spine, but there was a lot of neurosurgery in glioblastomas and other things that you were doing on the show there. How do you look at it? And there's a great moment, maybe it was a couple of times, you and Dr. Bookvar, just you talking with your surgical team saying, hey, let's stand back. Let's close our eyes for 10 seconds. This is a human being in front of us here, which I thought was a very poignant moment for me, saying, okay, we're taking this technical aspect of medicine out of this, and we're actually humanizing this whole experience right now. So for me, is how do you not just look at it as a brain, but you're looking at it as a human that you're performing surgery on?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that Mitzi's experience was unique for a couple of reasons. One, for the most part, I meet a patient on a single day and then recommend surgery or not. And then, so I don't get to know them very well. I mean, there are cases that you follow for maybe once a year and then they just decide to operate. But the reason why Mitzi's was unique was not so much the original time. I mean, I met her once, which you didn't see that the first time I met her. You saw the day she was admitted to the hospital and was going to get the embolization. And so part of it was that there was this lead up to it where she had a procedure before my first surgery. And then she was actually fine for 24 hours afterwards. And then she had this complication, and it was a stroke of all things, which is my dad had a stroke, and I have a tremendous amount of kind of experience personally with stroke. And it just touches a certain side of me that, if my dad had cancer and she had cancer, I'd probably feel the same way. Like John's dad died of leukemia. So, I think that it was the nature of Mitzi's, the personality, her husband, and also the time leading up, the fact that she had, and then there was this prolonged period of time before my second surgery, where I was, with her every day and seeing her get better and encouraging her. And they were up from Tennessee. They were living in New York for like 2 months. And so there was a lot of, this prolonged, and then I took her back to the OR again after spending like the last 2 months with her. And that's a rare occurrence. So I think that, and I still stay in touch with them. And, her husband is as different from me as a human being can be, but yet, we found this, relationship that's really amazing actually. And so I think that was just kind of very unique for all those reasons. The fact that it got on Netflix. I mean, I told the film team, I was like, how does this happen? It's like, it was just so lucky that was one of the cases, because that's not that common. On the other hand, I think showing vulnerability is not a bad thing. I mean, it's a human. I'm human, and I think that when you try to cover things up too much, I think you lose an opportunity to have a relationship, and you lose the ability to not just for your patients, but the nurses and when people see that, people draw closer to you, and they're more likely to work hard and try to make things better, because they think they realize more what's at stake. It's not just like making donuts. But a lot of my colleagues, like, how could you, like, I could never be like that. Like, I can't do that. And look, I didn't come to become a physician just to be a mechanic. I enjoy that aspect of my job. I like the social and the kind of spiritual aspect of being a physician, and irrespective of neurosurgery. Unfortunately, our field attracts a lot of people that don't have that ethic and don't even go into it. They just want to do it for the technical reasons, or the ego reasons, the money reasons, what have you. And so, I try to maintain that component of myself in everything I do. It's not easy sometimes. I mean, and there are times where I just can't. It's a difficult family, and I need to get some separation, or people just are too needy and they just need too much, and you have to set up a boundary. But I give all my patients my cell phone. So, they have access to me, but I have to know where I sometimes have to draw the line somewhere. But, that's why you have to choose your cases wisely and hopefully limit your complications, so that, more often than not, it's a celebration rather than a dirge that you have to go through. But in general, I think some of those negative moments are what makes you. That, if you don't have those deep experiences with people and really feel the pain and suffering that you may have caused or may have contributed to, and actually deal with that personally, I think it makes you a much more kind of interesting person, interesting doctor. In fact, Netflix came out in June. In July, I probably had the worst complication of my life, and was just devastating. And I didn't have a lot of time to enjoy. It really affected my kind of like countenance and my overall mood during, and plus COVID was going on. But because I take these things very hard. I take the responsibility for what I do, and so I have to live with myself. And it takes me a long time to get over these things sometimes. And I think that came out a little bit with Mitzi. Luckily I had time to get better than she got better, so it was, it lifted me, her improvement, and she's doing great now. So that was, we were all very lucky about that.
What do you do to get over those emotions? I mean, is it something not only professionally, but personally that you do, that you're feeling like, I've internalized kind of this person's pain, this person's grief or sadness, or the family? I'm feeling that myself right now. I still need to be able to do my job, and it's affecting me in some way. So is there something that you do personally that kind of gets you away from that feeling?
Yeah, I just show vulnerability. I'm honest. Like, if I tell my wife, I'll tell my kids, and even John or my partners. We have complications, feel comfortable coming to one another, and no one can understand. My wife is an anesthesiologist; she gets it, but my partners understand, and we have a culture here where it's okay to do that. No one's going to come at you and say, "Oh, I can't believe you did that. You're an idiot." And even if somebody makes a mistake that they probably shouldn't have, we recognize that. I think everyone here is trying to do the right thing. There's no one here that's like a wing nut and just going off the deep end and doing things they shouldn't be doing. And so I think that I give my partners, I give myself the space to be able to be like that. If they see it coming from their leader, if I go to one of them, if I can cry, or if things are really bad, or I just say I'm just devastated by this, they see that and they feel the same coming to me, I think. And so I think, though, that shared experience, the ability to do that, doesn't make it better, but I think you feel the support and it helps you get over it. Obviously, getting back in the OR really helps. Just getting some wins to get over those stressors is helpful too. It's like getting back on the horse. And so it's a combination of those things. It can take a long time. So it could take months sometimes before you really feel yourself again when it's really bad. And that's those types of complications happen to me, say 3 or 4 times in my life so far. And there are other ones that are less severe, but nonetheless, these things happen. And then that you've been through it before, you know that you're going to get better. You have confidence that this is a normal reaction. It's a grief reaction. And you know that what you're experiencing is temporary, but it's appropriate. And if I didn't feel that, then what the hell am I doing? If somebody really, if there's some death and destruction, and you go out and have a couple martinis and kick back and it doesn't affect you, that you're in the wrong business, frankly. You have to feel that, or else you're not going to make yourself better. Because a big reason why you try to make yourself better is to avoid those things. You should know how painful it is. And so you just do everything you can to avoid that. If that doesn't penetrate you, you're not going to do those things. You can't have it both ways. You can't be impenetrable and then try to be the best you can be, because the failure that drives your ultimate makes you work harder and makes you be more creative. And so they're part and parcel of the same thing.
I want to circle back a little bit on a question Dana asked you earlier about intuition and how that plays into you as a professional. An example, you think you were working on a brain tumor on the show, and you're looking at different margins or where the tumor was and so on and so forth, and not quite sure if you got enough and whether do we need to go back in, do we need to, so on and so forth. How much does intuition play into what you do professionally?
It still plays a big role, but in general, that's a kind of not a good thing. One of American medicine's problems is that with a fee-for-service system, there's such a perverse incentive to do more. And so a lot of people rely on intuition and make decisions, but intuition is still a soft science. And so intuition is based on a lot of factors. How tired you are, how much money you're making, do I have dinner tonight? Do I have to get home? And so I think data and hard data and the truth is important of what's really going on. And as in fact, that particular case, since then, we have a new dye we can give patients ahead of time that can color the tumor in the OR with a certain type of filter on our OR microscope camera. So whatever's pink is tumor. So yes, like in the old days, you used to use intuition. Like, I think that's tumor, but now you don't really have to do that anymore for a certain type of tumor. And you should push your envelope and make sure you have that equipment in the OR, because there's no way your intuition is going to be good as something that's actually real. And so I think that's kind of the best, a good example of, it looks like it's probably abnormal, we should go there, versus really knowing. I tell my residents, there's no such thing as maybe in our business. Yes or no. Do you know it or you don't know it? And I think we do edge into this kind of gray area with things like tumor margins, or theoretically even decision-making, should I do the surgery or not? But I think the onus is on us to make sure we really limit that stuff as much as possible, and then we adopt tools and techniques, and we learn and we get enough data so that we really mitigate and limit them as much as we can. So our decision making is less based on intuition and more based on, standard of care, the historical data. The literature, although the literature is kind of screwed up because a lot of that's biased. And so the way we overcome that is teams, collaboration, other people's opinions, and technology as best we can to really overcome a lot of the decision making that's purely intuitive. And I think it doesn't mean we don't still use it. And I think medical decision making there's still a fair amount of experience that comes into this. And it's one of the reasons why AI hasn't really impacted healthcare as much as it probably should. And frankly, the human brain may have to do with fear. A computer can't feel fear yet. And the fear of failure and the emotion that goes into that does affect our decision-making. And that's hard to, program into a computer still. Because we fear a future, we fear death, for example. Computers never die. If you're never going to die, how would you live your life? And so those fears are built into this intuition. And that's why AI, we're getting closer, but those decisions still plays a role. So, but now technology is getting better, but the human piece still is super valuable. And so it's a complicated interaction between these things. And we know when we're making a judgment call based on intuition versus the technology that might give us the answer. And so there are still areas like that, but I think it's very important that you try to limit those when the technologies come out and learn them, adopt them, find money to pay for them so you can, cut that back as much as possible.
You made an interesting point about the fear of death, and Dana and I have talked about that on a couple of episodes with some guests. Do you feel it's part of being a physician to prepare your patients and your patients' families for death?
Not mine. No, John, I think does have to do that. The vast majority of my patients survive for a long time unless there's a bad complication. So, I really don't talk about death routinely ahead of time. There are a handful of cases every year, particularly aneurysms, like ruptured aneurysm cases where, you could theoretically, I'm knock on wood, I've never lost a patient on the table, but we've come close from massive bleeding and things like that. But in general, it's the complication afterwards, a big stroke or cerebral swelling or some brain injury that, leads to death. But that conversation we can have afterwards. And I've had those conversations. I've taken care of patients that have come in basically brain dead and have to get a family from hope to no hope. And that transition's hard. But John's more, every glioblastoma that he takes care of is going to die before John himself. Their life expectancy is in the order of years or less. So he has to have that kind of, and that came out with Chris, in the show. I think there was an extraordinary amount of time where John really wasn't talking about death until it was kind of imminent. And I think that doctors who deal with a lot of cancer patients are kind of like that, because you can imagine if every cancer patient went to their doctor and they said, you're going to die, they'll go to somewhere else. They want to have hope. They want to think there's a potential cure. And so it's kind of truthy. Like you have to say, there's hope here. I'm going to really do everything I can. And so to bridge that gap of you're going to die because this disease early is often, that's probably not brought up as much as it should be, because you wouldn't have a practice if you did, because they'll just go to somebody else who says you have a chance. So you have to be kind of honestly dishonest. And then when it gets to the point where they break through the therapy, then you have to start having those conversations. And John's remarkably good at that. And I think you saw that in both the Chris part where all of a sudden there was no more hope.
Right.
Also, even in the COVID episode where he was dealing with this a man from New Jersey that came in with COVID that was trying to give the guy a chance, and then basically had the conversation as a dad. He had kids, and John's a little different than I am. If I ever take care of John's patients, I'm like rolling my eyes, like these people are smoking dope. Like this is a terrible disease, and they think they're going to, get out of this. And I tend to be a little more frank, and then I drive John crazy. You can't say that to them. They're not ready. And so there's this balance, and we have very different types of patients that we take care of. So I'm very honest because I can be. John can't quite be that honest, especially until he has to be. It's not that he's being dishonest. He just has to choose the right time and place. I can probably do that a little more liberally because I don't have to get people to that point to be able to, for them to give me the ability to operate on them.
Has COVID significantly changed the way you've been able to practice medicine in the last 3 years?
I think it's affected us more on as neurosurgeons that we still get to do our cases because we're not really elective. So, we were shut down for a couple of months and then it all came back. I think it's made me more, the story I tell is of the ventilator. We had a huge ventilator problem, and I basically got a hold of all these ventilators that I was going to try to bring in the Lenox from all the plastic surgeons on the Upper East Side. They all have ventilators in their office, and we were running out. And then the governor that same night said he was going to procure them as of Sunday night. And so I was like, oh my God, we better get these in like right away. And I found out that our loading dock wasn't open on the weekends and I couldn't get these things delivered in time for the government procuring them. And I was like devastated that I wasn't going to be able to help the hospital. And my CMO basically says to me, Dave, it's okay. If just because one of our patients isn't getting one doesn't mean that somebody in need isn't getting one. It just means they're not going to be here. And it was like, boom, like my head exploded. I was like, I think that our healthcare system and our incentives are so selfish. And that I think the lesson was, it's not just about me and my patients and our department and our hospital. The COVID sort of took the lid off this whole, health equity piece and the lack of care in at-risk communities. And I think it just made me more kind of, more liberal minded about giving up things to get something and to be open to not always having just what I need, and not that I won't always fight for my patients, but if there's someone else that needs something more than me, or if one of my patients, one of somebody else's patients needs that ICU bed more than mine, or there's a piece of equipment that another doctor needs more than me, he can use it. And I'm more at ease with that now than I was certainly before COVID, because kind of more open to the idea that, it's just because you're not using it doesn't mean you should be. And you have to be, almost like triaging the resource as best you can.
I'm going to throw you a big hypothetical here. If you were in charge of changing the landscape of healthcare in the United States, how would you change it?
It's super easy, actually. I think physicians should be salaried. I think that the incentives need to be changed. Now, the problem with that is that hospitals want volume. But like, we're very busy and we're all salaried. So, the problem is that who's going to do those cases no one wants to do? And will care suffer because things that sort of suck won't get done? I think that is a downside, but there's no perfect way of doing this. I just think the current way of doing it is way worse. I mean, just having people operating people for no reason at all, just to get paid. And there are like lawyers that pay doctors ahead of time because they know they're going to get a settlement, and they'll pay the physician to operate no matter what this film show. And physicians do that because they're getting paid. And so I think that in balance, we'd be much better off to be salaried. And then you have to choose your physicians differently. You have to make sure you have, you're choosing people for the right reasons. There are other incentives you can build in based on outcome or based on patient quality or, the patient experience and things that are more soft without making it all about how many cases you're doing. By the same token, everybody wants to make more money. And so you just have to spread out, I think, if you go from doing 10 cases a year to doing 500 cases a year, of course you're going to make more, but it shouldn't be a one-to-one process, so that every 3 years or 4 or 5 years is looked at and, hey, you're doing better, we'll pay you a little more, back the next time. But hospitals are driven by fee-for-service. Doctors are driven by, the fee-for-service and doing more to get paid more. That really is the inherent problem in our healthcare system. I don't believe in single payer, because what single payer means is that everything's Medicare, and the health system would collapse if everything was paid Medicare, because and private insurers make a lot of money, and they pay us better, and I think that's necessary to attract the best and the brightest to go into healthcare. If in America, with all the built-in stuff, I tell you what, if you're going to do that, then you have to eliminate malpractice, eliminate medical legal. You have to eliminate the cost of going to medical school. You have to make health college free, medical school free, no malpractice premiums, totally change the medical legal framework, totally eliminate the bureaucracy of healthcare. It's impossible. And so you can't just attack fee for service and say that's the problem without fixing all those other things and saying there should be a single payer. That's a disaster. So I think the salary piece solves the problem, because if you do more, you will get paid more over time, but it's not every case matters. It would improve culture in hospitals because you'd be nicer to one another. People aren't like competing with the guy down the hallway more than they're competing with a guy across the street. Would increase collaboration, and you make outcome and quality the metric of being paid more. So quality matters, your outcome matters. And I think those are the ways that I would really push for, and it would work.
Do you think we'll ever get there?
No.
Or even close?
No.
I don't think so either.
No. We can do it in chunks. I mean, our department runs that way. You can't create a world-class department in 8 years unless you do something special. We didn't exist 8 years ago. Now we're top 50 in the world in Newsweek, and top 28 in the country in U.S. News. I mean, you don't do that unless you're doing something unique, and that's the culture, and the way we're paid is where it started, for sure. And I'm 100% sure, and I think it's a small microcosm of the way this could work.
Have you ever thought about the legacy that you want to leave professionally and personally?
Yeah, I think that the best answer to that is I never really thought about being a leader as a young neurosurgeon. I just wanted to be the best neurosurgeon I could be. I didn't think about being a chairman. In fact, I kind of looked down on it. Like, that's just kind of there are two kinds of things. I learned there's a woman at UCal Berkeley, I can't remember her name, who I interviewed once. And there's basically gold star leadership and North Star leadership. And gold star leadership is when you're looking at things that give you credit. You're on a committee, or you got a certain score, or you were given a title. And that's unfortunately quite necessary in medicine. You have to get good grades, you have to get good MCAT scores, you have to do well as a medical student to get a good residency. And so we're driven by gold star stuff, until you're done your residency. And all of a sudden now you're an attending. And people still focus on gold star things: money, titles, power, these things that give them these positive feedbacks they can put in. It's like driven by your CV, basically. Like, what's on your CV? When you die, does your CV matter? The answer is no. So the gold star thing is stuff that's not necessarily on your CV in the same way where, I really want to do that. I'm gonna focus on this creative thing. And it's not necessarily something on your CV. Maybe it will become something if it's really successful, because then it's basically like it's a measure of some larger idea. And there are leaders like this. Elon Musk is a gold star guy. Steve Jobs is a gold star guy. Jamie Dimon is more of a those guys are North Star. Jamie Dimon is kind of more of a gold star guy, running a bank. I mean, it's hard to be really North Star doing something really in a conventional way. And so healthcare is super gold star driven. Everybody's gold star who are leaders for the most part. And I was never like that. I kind of had this disturbance in my brain. Like, I always wanted to do creative stuff, and had a couple of failures along the way, had some really bad mentors. I had really bad chairmen, guys who truly took advantage of me. And fast forward to 2010, I was reverse commuting. I'd been my third hospital, and I really wanted to get back in New York, and just took this flyer on Lenox and really had no idea what I was doing. And, came in here, thought I knew what I could, but all of a sudden I realized that I had leadership skills, that I really wanted to do that. Like, I really wanted to be a chairman now. I really wanted to use my experiences to develop something great and be impactful to young neurosurgeons and not treat them the way I got treated. And really, that was very powerful, like not letting shit roll downhill and focusing on the big picture of building a great department. So, if there's a legacy I want to leave, it's the number one, that I want to make sure my kids feel like they had the support they needed, that I was a good influence on their life, and that I was a positive influence on them. I'm not a perfect dad, I'm just not. I've made some mistakes, but that they recognize that I really do the best I can for them, firstly. And then the second thing is that I left, what I left behind was valuable, and that people use that themselves to build on their lives. That the junior guys that I've influenced, that I've recruited and helped and to help develop, and that I've set a standard and I've behaved a certain way, that as they go along, that they, adopt some of the some of the ideas and principles and behavioral things that I've initiated, that it continues on after I'm gone. And, maybe that'll slowly change healthcare in a way. So that's kind of, I think, in a very kind of small way. But there are other things like Netflix is a great legacy. Our Brain Turns program with like 16,000 kids doing, virtual internship the last few summers, and kind of the feedback I've gotten from high school, college, medical students wanting to become neurosurgeons, wanting to go to medical school. It's just, you start to have this, I enjoy having that influence and being impactful that way, and leaving the world behind like that. I look forward to when I'm done thinking that I might have, influenced people to, do the things that I'm doing. And that's, I guess, the best way to answer that question.
And this question's on the same line. When David Langer passes on, is there a word that you hope your friends describe you by?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's more than one word. It's probably integrity, honesty, and grit, ethics. I always try to do the right thing. So I think those are the things that I hope they come away with. And again, it's not what's on your CV. It just never is. And the sooner you realize that, it really is very, it's very relaxing. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do things that might contribute to that and write papers or, get a title or, try to make, do some mechanical things that might I started a IT company called Playback Health because I just was pissed off the way we were communicating with our patients and thought there's a much better way of doing that. Is that a gold star thing? It's a North Star thing that's become a gold star thing. Like, wow, you have a freaking IT, you have a company? It's like, well, it's not mine. It's like, we have a CEO and we've been really successful, but it came from the idea of doing something differently, doing something better. And that's what underlies success is that I think you have to focus on things that really get you excited, that turn you on, and you can't have any fear. Just screw it. If it screws up, you learn from it.
Will there be a season 2 of Lenox Hill? Will we get to see Dr. Langer on TV again?
Yeah, we were disappointed. They decided not to do Lenox Hill 2, but they are doing a show called NYC Emergency, which John and I are going to be a part of. It's going to be a little shorter format. They wanted to take out some of the drama and the kind of long format patient things and focus more on things that really happen like a one-off. So we're going to be in it. I think it's we probably got a lot of viewership in a certain subtype of people. The world would rather watch Tiger King or Cheer or
unfortunately true.
Yeah, I love for example the F1 show
right
on Netflix. It's freaking amazing. You can't really do that in healthcare. You can't quite do that. I think if there was no HIPAA and absolutely no boundaries on this, you could probably have a show that would completely, blow your mind, but this is not entertainment. We're not here to entertain people. And, F1 is entertainment. So they can show everything. And there are probably some things they didn't show, like financial things or some of the shenanigans behind some of the hard business decisions they were making, but they're pretty much hanging it out there. They're talking about one another. The egos come out, the stresses between the different teams and stuff. And so that's what makes that so interesting. It's kind of like in our business, the cases aren't really what's interesting. I really thought that the OR, scenes are going to be so amazing, especially with the exoscope. But, after a while, even the OR stuff, it gets kind of, it's hard to really understand what we're doing. It's hard to get kind of get oriented enough on the pictures. You see blood, you see your brain. Okay, that's cool. Wow, it's really other stuff. It's why Grey's Anatomy is so successful. It's all the stories and what's really going on and how people think and the pain and suffering and the strategy and the ego and so we got a component of that, but we only got to a certain level. We didn't have people yelling and screaming at each other or throwing shit or hating one another. And I think that would take it to a different level. But Lenox Hill appealed to people who wanted to see, emotion, wanted to see, the value of doing good things to people. And that only goes so far. And so we got great viewership in people like you, and a lot of doctors saw it, a lot of medical students, people who are considering going to medical school or into healthcare, hugely impactful, but it's still a small subset of the world. The average, guy in the street drinking a beer is not going to watch Lenox Hill. And frankly, if I was not in it, I'm not sure I would have watched it. Honestly, am I looking to get emotional and see? I don't know. I'm not sure if I would have watched. Certainly not all 9 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it made a lot of people uncomfortable, right? I mean, it was real life, real emotion, raw emotion, and that's, people don't tune into that. They want to get that. They want to get away from that in their life, right? They don't want to watch that on TV.
No,
but that's what I appreciated myself about the show, because it was something that was real. I think, like you said, the OR scenes completely played into, the whole patient care, the emotions of the patient, the prognosis of the patient, and so on and so forth. And that kept me as a viewer through those nine episodes, because I did want to see the follow through of those patients, whether it was a good prognosis or a poor prognosis, or they passed, and it evoked emotion from me. And that's what I appreciated from it.
Look, but I think you're not the typical.
I've been told that even by my mother.
Yeah.
And his friends.
I think the people who not only watched it, but really that impacted were, that's not the average person. It's not going to like I watched the first episode of Tiger King. I had to turn it off. I was like, I can't watch this crap. It's just like, it was kind of like National Enquirer on steroids. And, but that's, American culture, and really, look, this went all over the world. We got feedback from people every Europe and South America, Australia. But they're the same types of people in these environments that not only wanted to see this, but really benefited from that kind of watching something that wasn't just all, kind of National Enquirer all the time, or like The Masked Singer, but, what sells in the world isn't necessarily what is valuable. And it wasn't light. It wasn't like easy to digest. It required an effort, and it didn't make you, it made you think, and it made you maybe even cry, and it made you feel maybe a little insecure about yourself, and blah, blah, blah. But I was a little bit surprised that we weren't renewed. But when you really think about it, it's really not that surprising, especially when you see the things that drive these are just companies. They just need ratings, and this is not built for that. And so, and by the same token, who cares? I mean, if they don't want to do it again, that's fine. It's a lot of work. So
I can imagine.
We're doing, it'll be, who knows how this one will turn out. We'll see.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing you and John in the new series. And again, we thank you for your time. It's been very insightful.
Absolutely.
And the conversation was very welcomed. It'll be welcomed by our listeners. I encourage our listeners, if they haven't seen Lenox Hill on Netflix, to give it a shot. I think most of the people that listen to our podcast will appreciate your show and appreciate the effort you put in. So, David, thanks again. We're happy to host you in Santa Barbara next time you're out. So just let us know, and best of luck to you and Lenox Hill Hospital.
Well, it's the fact that there are people like you guys doing this kind of work is very gratifying. It's in this time, in the time we're living in, and the society and the culture we live in, it's probably more than the minority that are like you. It's just their voices aren't heard. And so I think it's important that there's not only a recognition of stuff, but that we let it get out there, because the alternative is terrible. And somehow we have to break through this morass we're in. And hopefully you're doing your small part. And I appreciate your thinking of me and reaching out. And hopefully you'll get some listeners that'll be impacted by the work you're doing.
I think so. And
Thank you.
Maybe we'll get to talk to you again down the road.
Be great. Thanks again.
All right, David, take care.
Thanks so much.
Be well.
Bye, guys. Take care.
We appreciate our listeners and are interested in your comments and suggestions. Feel free to email us at fearmeoutpodcast@gmail.com. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor for this podcast, please email us at fearmeoutpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.